Hello, here we are again with Muki Tenenbaum. We are exploring through this ongoing series of videos his philosophy, his disillusionism, and his misalgic theory about how human behavior is shaped by our attempts to avoid suffering or to mitigate suffering. And on a weekly basis for a while now, we've been using the news, we've been trying to take advantage of current affairs in order to illustrate some aspects of this philosophy, in order to discuss and understand some of its details. And this week, we are almost at the beginning of April 2021 now. We are going to take a bit of news that it's rather small when compared with other things we've been analyzing, but it will help us analyze central aspects of the theory. We are going to speak about the death of Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, the late husband of the Queen of England, at the age of 99, no less. But we will take this small bit of news as an excuse to discuss some central aspects of Muki's philosophy.
Well, about 10 years ago, I published a book called Disillusionism. And in that book, the central issue was basically our terror of death. I called it ATD in short, because it's from the Greek auto thanatos, which is death, demia, which is terror. And that's the key word in this definition. What we have, our relationship with death is not of fear. Okay. In the misalgic theory, we know that the only thing we do is running away from suffering. And when we run away from suffering, the main suffering, the one that most common, especially in these times, is fear. It's really not suffering itself, but it's fear. It's fear of being maimed. It's fear of shame. It's fear of my conscious thinking, or my consciousness of guilt. Is fear. But death, we don't experience fears toward death. We experience terror. And what's the difference between terror and fear? Okay. In fear, you have two things that terror does not have. One, it may or may not happen. Whatever you are afraid of, or whatever you are scared of, that thing may or may not happen. They may be 99% sure, but still, there is always, the word is hope. Yes, that little word that keeps us on the fear side of things. The second thing is that we know what we are afraid of. Okay, so if I'm afraid, if I don't want to go out with two ties, that I tied two ties, a friend of mine did that by mistake, and one was in his back and one was in his front. The fear would be shame. Yes, if I'm afraid of going into a surgery, the fear is pain. Or if I am afraid of getting a vaccine, the fear may be pain itself. So the fear is something something we know. Death, on the other side, is something we don't know. Well, you can always say, as we say, disillusionism, sleeping is like death. That is very nice. People do not see sleeping as death, just because they understand that there is a very good chance of waking up from your sleep. Sometimes it's not a good chance, sometimes it's a bad chance, depending on where you are waking up to. But basically, is that. So when I am going to sleep, I experience the same as death. Well, that is the experience, but as they say again, death is an unknown. This is I think there is nobody who will disagree with me. And the problem of the unknownness to make it to bring it back from the terror side, it's to make it known. So there is all kinds of religions that tells you that this will happen and that will happen, and gives you some kind of certainty, so you can go into death just with fear, no terror. And of course, we know we're going to die. That's it. There is no other way. So how do we deal with that? Well, there is two ways to deal with that. One is to give me some kind of certainty. The other one is to make me immortal. Well, immortality, as a logical proposition, is impossible. Why? Because you never know you are immortal. You never achieve immortality. You're always on your way to immortality. So immortality is not, but somebody says, oh, okay, don't worry, I don't need immortality. I need just 10,000 years of living, and then I'm done. The answer is, from this side, I agree with you. 10,000 years or immortality looks the same. At the end of the 10,000 years, they don't look the same. They will not look the same to you. Okay, but I understand people try to get so religion come to you and says, don't worry, there is something that is mortal. It's your soul. Your soul, your soul. When you die, your soul will go up. Some say they will go down. Others will say it will become part of an animal. Others will say it will become part of a person. And then the transmigration of the soul. I always find it funny because when people say that they were how do you say
reincarnated.
Reincarnated, yes. When they say, I'm sorry, the word really sometimes it's so crazy. So when you reincarnate, normally you are the reincarnate of a prince in Egypt. Yes, you are not the reincarnate of somebody who was cleaning the bathroom in Babylonia or in or in Middle Ages Germany. No, normally you are from something very important. That's the first thing, and the second thing that I always found it funny is, why don't you reincarnate to the past? I mean, once we're breaking all the rules of physics and chemistry and everything, yes, of the science, let's go to the past. Why I don't reincarnate and I become Napoleon Bonaparte? That would be great, yes, depending, or even to reincarnate in myself 20 years ago. How about that? I mean, there are reincarnations, I think are good ones. Normally, this goes there, and you don't remember anything, and you don't know anything about it. And of course, what is the point of reincarnating if you don't know you're reincarnating? So it doesn't really work. So there are there's other ways. There's more civilized ways of immortality. One, of course, will be the scientific one. Your genes. Yes? You are passing your genes to your children. If you have children, not everybody has children, but if you pass your children, so then your genes becomes immortal, and they continue, and you are really part of a chain, and it's the whole thing helps that way. The other way would be to have it from the point of view of the government, of the illusion, the state. So you are part of the great American enterprise. Yes, we are of freedom, the fighters for freedom, or the fighters for whatever you want to do. And then there is immortality, and everybody will remember you. And there is all the times the minute of silence. So you it's more than that. You can prepare, as this guy did. The king did something to me totally crazy. He prepared his own funeral. You must be nuts to do that. Well, no, you're immortal. You think you're going to look at your own funeral. You're going to be there. You're going to participate at the funeral. Of course, he will say, no, I just didn't want my old lady to be able to need to take care of matters that I could take care. It's also possible that because you are the consort of England, you are supposed, it's part of your job to prepare your funeral. Yes. And then I would say, okay, it's part of your job. You're getting paid for to do something. You do that stupid thing. There's so many things you get paid to do that stupid. This could be another one. What do you think about all this, Florencio?
I absolutely see what you mean. I know the concept, but I think it's clear enough. We have a certainty in death, and a terrifying certainty at that. I agree, this is not fear, this is something completely different, and it's something we in the end cannot grasp, what it is to be dead. And I see all these solutions which in the end do not work, but I see how a legacy, to have a line of heirs, sons and grandsons, a religion that speaks about myths of transmigration and reincarnation. I see how all this can help, but my question is, what happens with the issue of time? Do we always have this terror with us, or is it completely different when one is 99 and death is, well, by all possible standards, very imminent, and when one is a child or a very young person and death is, even if there is a risk of dying, death is nowhere in our concerns. So I guess using this example of a guy who got almost to 100 years old. Is there a relationship between the intensity, between the prevalence of this terror of death you are describing, and age, and how old we are?
Well, it's oftenness or assiduousness is the right word that we have to do when we're dealing with age. My daughter, when she was 4 years old, or she realized she was going to die. And she realized that I'm going to die, and then she realized she is going to die. And so when you are 4 years old, she already had terror of death. It was clear. The question is how often will she think about it? How assiduous is the thought? How insidious and how assiduous? Because that's about that. So the answer is almost none. It disappears. Okay, it comes back. So it goes with age is one of the factors, but not only age. Circumstances are. You go into the army, and I'm talking not in the Luxembourgish army. Yes, you're going into the Congolese army, the Eritrean army, the Israeli army, and you know, death is really a possibility. So terror deaths come back again and becomes a main issue or an issue to contend with when or somebody's sick, you know, very sick. I'm sure that with COVID, we had a lot of people, young people, thinking about death while they were there. I mean, you were going to a hospital, and remember that the whole noise from outside is death, death, death. A lot of people have died. We're talking about 3 million people died out of COVID, and we're talking about the death of this guy who was 19 years old. That's says something about us, but it doesn't really matter. It is your own death that we're talking about. Now here comes a problem. We have before we go into the age, we have a problem with the word. You see, we're using the word death to imply my death, others people's death, including yours. I'm sorry to say that. You will understand because you will see it from your side. And then you have, of course, the death of an animal, and the death of democracy, and the death of whatever. And you cannot use that word for everything. Suddenly, we don't have synonyms. Yes, the English language, which is known for its synonyms, the riches of the thesaurus does not have one word to say that, to use it for everything else, and it's nothing to do. I mean, there is nothing in common between my death and yours, from my point of view. Zero, nothing. Of course, if you will die, I will suffer and so forth, but I will be there to suffer. In my death, I will not. Of course, then we would turn it around and say other people will suffer in death, which is an issue in itself. So going back to the ages issue, which is important, is the older you get, the death becomes a closer thing. But there is a moment in which perceivably you perceive that you have more past than future. That will be the formula. At that point, when you have more past than future, death becomes imminent, becomes an issue. There is an immediacy, an urgency that starts working there. But remember, we are all living longer. This 99-year-old guy who died is not an anomaly. Nobody dies at 99. In fact, there are thousands. There is 500,000 centennials in the world. 500,000. In Japan, there is something like 50,000 people above the age of 100. We heard and we know about people who are born there, and we started knowing people physically, personally. Oh, people in the 90s, we know a lot of them. I am sure, many of us. I'm sure that not in Somalia, but yes, in the Western world. So the more we push, the more the longer we live, the longer this thing happen. It's postponed. The moment in which you have more past than future. Do you agree, Florencio?
Yes, but that crucial moment for our argument keeps going forward in life. When you mentioned it, I thought, which is just an anecdote, that it's interesting. Dante Alighieri, the author of the Divine Comedy, he has this aha moment when he realizes that death is imminent and he has to do lots of things. And one of them is writing the Divine Comedy so that his name will be remembered. And he's 35, the age at which this realization comes. Of course, he was born in the 13th century, and 35 must have been quite old, around the year 1300. But this doesn't happen to us anymore. At 35 in our societies, you're a child. You are almost a kid.
But it is the infantilization. we talked about in one of our videos.
Mm-hmm.
Infantilization, this is not the result of infantilization. Infantilization is the result of postponing death for so long. Okay, and that means that at the age of 35, you still don't know what will be your future. In fact, you're still thinking, and yeah, you know, when you are 35, you better know what you're going to be your next steps, because your business life, your working life has already a limit. Okay, not anymore. But I you know, when I was young, dying at 70 was the normal person. Oh, die 72, normal age. 60s, well, a little bit young, but not not very not very young. Yes, in the age of 60s. And 50s was, well, yes, he was young, died young, not terribly young. People used to die from heart attacks, you know. I remember as a child, people dying from heart attacks. Today, only 7% of people who get a heart attack die from it. And we talk in the Western world, of course, yes. But even you know, even when you think about the age, the longer we live, of course, we can begin doing plans again. So when we have now 8 billion people in the world, it's not just 8 billion people. We have 8 billion people. From them, a high percentage of them are younger, feeling younger than they were. And when I mean feeling younger, I don't mean I feel young, but you are really a decrepit going with them. I'm talking about having a reason to feel young physically. And remember, not only will you live longer, but we live better. The people who are 70s and 80s, the quality of life is much better than the one that had at the age of 60s or 70s. And I remember, this is something I remember. And I lived in the Western world, yes. But you see, in Africa, for example, where we think, well, but people in Africa still live less. No, not much less. This has to do with how medicine has trickled down. Okay, so in the 70s they invented all kind of new X-rays, the tomography, and the MRIs, and the other kind of things, and each of them allowed people to get a diagnosis before time. It's not drugs that say that's really, it's really early diagnosis. Cancer is one of the main examples. People used to die of cancer, was 80% or 90% people die from cancer when they got it. Now it's less than 20. So what happens is that these machines were replaced, and when the old ones were sent to poorer places, they ended up in Africa. And so diagnosis is now much earlier in Africa. And since the drugs are now cheaper, because India made a lot of those drugs cheaper, we have a lot of people living a long time in Africa, unless they go into a war, yes, in which case the age becomes terrible. So the whole humanity has pushed death far. But again, when death arrives, or when you are close to death, really, it doesn't matter. It is almost as if you were not born.
No, I think the interesting aspect of this for our analysis is not the individual consequences, because as you say, when I die alone, and it is my own death, and it's terrifying enough, whatever age it comes at. But from the point of view of what you usually call the sync, the organization of every human being, us, we all go about our business almost sleepwalking. From that point of view, there are great changes. There are big differences. So maybe from an existential individual point of view, death is still the same terrifying certainty at the end of the line. But from the social point of view, from the gregarious point of view, it's postponement changes everything, alters almost every aspect of life.
Well, you may think when you are young that when you're going to be 90 and you're going to be that, you will be tired of living. That's enough. I had enough, blah, blah. And it's not true. Ask anybody who is 90. Yes, my grandfather told me when I was a child, I was not a child, I was already a youngster, and he told me, you know, he was in his 80s. He told me, you know, I was 4 years old a few minutes ago, just now. So remember that from here, things look very different than from there. Once you look backwards or you look forward, it has nothing to do one with the other. And as you say, the issues of postponement in the macro, in the sink, are very important. Because, as I said, there are many more active people in the world. It's not just more people, it's more active people. Active people consume many more resources. One more thing, to be able, one of the things that helps us with immortality has to do with climate change. They come to you and they say, listen, you are going to die, but we are going to save the planet. And suddenly it's not your age, it's the planet's age. Yes? So part of the terror is distracted. Remember that distraction is our main weapon against suffering. The main way we run away from suffering is distraction. And so we distract ourselves and talk about climate change and saving the planets and the whales and everything else, because you cannot save yourself.
No, and again, maybe this is a subject for another video altogether, but you have a timeline that becomes so long, so epic. You now start thinking in terms of centuries to come. You can gauge your legacy and your impact in. I hear people speaking about the next millennia. And how the actions we do today will shape those ages. But we are almost done from a time point of view. It's still very interesting, and I guess we'll go back to some of these aspects in future videos.
Death will come back, as always. As an issue.
Of course.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.